Welcome back to my video series on the Kowa Spoke Cutter. This is the last video in this series, and the primary focus of this video is investment and return on investment. In the very beginning of this series, I talked about two spoke cutters: the P11 spoke cutter, the heavy duty one, the true multi-user machine, and then I talked about the Kowa Spoke Cutter, the light duty spoke machine. Let's focus on the P11 spoke cutter first. The P11 spoke cutter is a heavy duty piece of machinery. It is a small version of what you see in the high volume industrial workshop world. You have small machines like the P11 spoke cutter, $7,200 USD, and then you have big machinery in the heavy industrial manufacturing assembly world like CNC machines, heavy metal lathes, drill presses, mills, stuff like that. Heavy duty machinery, when you invest in them, has considerable risk. And understand, this is not a criticism. I'm just pointing out the nature of investment in heavy duty machinery in the industrial high volume manufacturing assembly world. You have people who will buy a piece of heavy machinery and they will have a high volume production environment, and for 10 or 20 years they're able to use that machine the entire time in that high volume environment, and because of that they get their return on investment as the original owner of that machine. But what also happens is you have that person who buys that same exact machine, and for various reasons they come up short. They don't quite get the business volume, or the business has to shut down for some reason, or they have to retire. And so what happens? They only get a partial investment on that machinery they invested in. They have to sell it off to someone else. And maybe that second owner will finish the return on investment, or maybe a third owner. The P11 spoke cutter runs into the same problem. $7,200 is a lot of money for a small heavy duty piece of equipment. And again, this is not a criticism of the P11. It's a fantastic spoke cutter. It's worth every penny. I would say it's the gold standard of hand operated spoke cutter. It's an excellent machine. It's worth every penny. But the problem with that P11 spoke cutter is that if your return on investment period is 10 years and you want to get that investment back, you need to be building about 200 wheels per year off of that P11 spoke cutter, on the assumption that you're charging about $2.25 per wheel to get that money back. Now some people are able to do that. I support someone who has 4 P11 spoke cutters, and in a slow year they're doing 200 wheels per year, and during a busy year they're pushing 1,000. All of their P11 spoke cutters have paid for themselves. But you have those people who buy a P11 spoke cutter who are only building 50, 60, 70 wheels per year. 10 years later, they're retiring, or they're having to shut their shop down for some reason. And what happens? They don't get that return on investment in that P11 spoke cutter. They have to sell it off to someone else who does. And even that person might have to sell off to someone else who will finish the return on investment. There's always that risk there with a heavy duty piece of machinery with a high front end cost. Again, that's not a criticism of the P11 spoke cutter. I'm just pointing out the nature of heavy duty machinery in the industrial high volume workshop assembly manufacturing world. It's normal. That's the P11 spoke cutter. Now let's talk about the Kowa Spoke Cutter. This is a light duty machine in a light duty category, built with the minimal materials needed to get the job done: cutting a spoke, rolling a spoke. Its upfront cost, depending on where you look, between $2,600 and roughly $3,400. About half the cost of a Kowa Spoke Cutter. Now what does this mean? This means the likelihood that you, as the original Kowa Spoke Cutter owner, putting in that initial investment, the likelihood that you'll get the return on investment is much higher. I bought mine May, June 2010, and from 2011 to 2016 I was doing 500 wheels per year off of this thing. By 2016 I already had my return on investment off of this Kowa Spoke Cutter. From 2017 onwards, I'm pretty much using this machine for free. That's because I was a high volume person at the time. But even at 100 to 200 wheels per year, as I'm doing now, if you're charging about $2 per wheel, $2.25 per wheel to pay off the machine, even at only 100 to 200 wheels per year, in 10 years, your Kowa Spoke Cutter is going to pay for itself. You're going to get your return on investment. The point I'm making here is that for a single user, single operator such as myself, at 100 to 200 wheels per year, an investment in a Kowa Spoke Cutter makes more sense than in a Philwood Spoke Cutter. This is less risky. For a small shop with maybe one dedicated wheel builder and an owner and salesperson who might do a few wheels of their own, 100 wheels per year, maybe 200 wheels per year, just like me now, this is a more sensible investment. And they're more likely going to get a return on investment from the Kowa Spoke Cutter than they would from a Philwood Spoke Cutter in the same environment. Again, this is not a criticism of the Philwood Spoke Cutter. I'm just pointing out what happens to heavy-duty machinery in that segment, what happens with light-duty machinery in this segment, and how this segment makes more financial sense investment-wise and return on investment-wise for a small shop environment or for a solo builder like myself. There is less of a likelihood that you'll have to sell this off to someone else for someone else to get the return on investment. The likelihood that you'll get the return on investment on the Kowa Spoke Cutter is much more higher as the original owner. So there's investment, return on investment. Now if you are interested in a Kowa Spoke Cutter, especially the latest version, this is a very old version. It's almost like an original, number 36, very old. There's two ways you can get information from the manufacturer and distributors of the Kowa Spoke Cutter. One thing you can do is you can send an email to Kowa at kowa-ss.co.jp. You send an email to them with an inquiry. One or two individuals that I know of there in a relatively short period of time will respond to your email and try their best to answer your questions. There might be a little loss in translation. You're talking to people in Japan. And if you do have a serious interest in a Kowa Spoke Cutter, if there's a distributor in your area, they will refer you to them. That's how you can directly contact them. An alternative way is to go to this website, https://msproducts-jpn.com. It's a website. And at this website, if you go to list of parts, you'll get a bunch of categorical pictures, and the cutter is actually in its own category with its own picture. You click on that and you'll get to see a photo of the latest version of the Kowa Spoke Cutter with its upgrades, improvements, and its gauge options. It has multiple gauge options, more than the original. And they have a way to be contacted there, and basically you'll be getting in touch with pretty much the same people who will once again, if there's a distributor near you, get you in touch with the distributor near you, etc., etc. And of course, while you're at the website, there's other Kowa products there that you can look at as well, in case you're interested. So I'll leave this here for a few more seconds, so you can jot it all down. As for myself, Robert Shackelford of Wheels by Fleming of San Jose, California. If you have questions for me or you need assistance, I can provide some assistance, but in a geographical sense, in terms of support, my support would be very limited. My email's on my website. You can actually find me online, Mr. Rabbit at mrrabbit.net. And you can shoot me questions and I'll be happy to reply to your questions. If you already own a Kowa Spoke Cutter and you are in the San Francisco Bay Area, as far north as Santa Rosa, as far northeast as Sacramento, as far south as Gilroy, or southwest, far southwest as Santa Cruz, for a small amount I can come out and check out your Kowa Spoke Cutter, work it over for you, look for anything that needs addressing, and if you're trying to get it back in the operation or threading the way you need it to thread properly, I can assist you with stuff like that. I do go to Southern California about once a year, so if you're in Anaheim, Westminster, Los Angeles, El Cerrito, in that area, but generally in the Los Angeles basin, around the end of December, beginning of January, shoot me an email and I can arrange an appointment where I come by and pay you a visit and once again look at your Kowa Spoke Cutter, examine it, service it, make adjustments as needed. But that's about as far as I can go. So if you have questions or need support, feel free to shoot me an email. To wrap up my video series on the Kowa Spoke Cutter, let me just say again, this machine is at 93,000 cycles. It's got a new set of dies, a new set of bearings, there's some maintenance on the cutter, everything's dialed in again. I'm going to push it past 100,000 cycles, and fingers crossed, I'm going to aim for 200,000, and I am a very, very happy, satisfied customer and user of the Kowa Spoke Cutters. I hope you enjoyed my video series on the Kowa Spoke Cutter, and I hope it was of some help or assistance to you. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you sometime again in the future. Goodbye.